The Sibanye gold mine heist, South Africa's biggest gold theft deep beneath the surface of South Africa's West Rand, in the labyrinthine tunnels of what was once the world's richest gold-bearing region. A criminal conspiracy was taking shape that would become one of the most audacious thefts in mining history. This is the story of the Sibanye gold mine heist, a sophisticated insider operation that saw hundreds of kilograms of gold systematically stolen from one of South Africa's most secure mining operations, and how a determined investigation ultimately brought the perpetrators to justice. The target. To understand the magnitude of this heist, you must first understand the target. Sibanye Gold, now known as Sibanye-Stillwater, operates some of the deepest and most productive gold mines in the world. The company's Driefontein operations, located in the West Rand region of Gauteng province, have been extracting gold from beneath the earth for decades, producing millions of ounces of gold that have contributed to South Africa's status as one of the world's premier gold-producing nations. The Driefontein complex is not just a single mine, but a vast network of underground operations. Shafts, tunnels, and processing facilities that stretch for miles beneath the surface. At depths reaching more than 3 kilometers below ground, miners work in extreme conditions, temperatures that can exceed 60 degrees Celsius, crushing atmospheric pressure, and constant dangers from rock falls and seismic activity. It is in this harsh and unforgiving environment that gold-bearing ore is extracted and sent to the surface for processing. But the real treasure lies not in the ore itself, but in what happens after it reaches the surface. The metallurgical plant at Driefontein is where the magic happens, where tons of rock are crushed, processed, and refined into pure gold bars worth millions of dollars. It is also where the most sophisticated security measures are implemented. Because mining companies have long understood that the greatest theft risk comes not from external criminals, but from the people who work within the system. The metallurgical plant operates as a highly controlled environment, gold-bearing, or moves through various stages of crushing, milling, chemical treatment, and finally smelting, where the pure gold is separated and formed into bars or semi-pure gold alloy that requires further refining. Every step of this process is supposed to be monitored, measured, and secured. Security protocols include physical barriers, electronic surveillance, strict access controls, and regular audits to account for every gram of gold that enters and leaves the facility. But as sophisticated as these security measures were, they were designed primarily to prevent external threats and random opportunistic theft. They were not designed to detect and prevent a systematic, long-term insider conspiracy carried out by the very people trusted to work within the most secure areas of the operation. The genesis of a criminal conspiracy. The heist that would eventually cost Sibanye Gold hundreds of kilograms of gold worth, tens of millions of rand, did not begin with a single dramatic plan or moment of inspiration. Instead, it evolved gradually as a group of miners and metallurgical plant workers realized they had access to one of the world's most valuable commodities and began to exploit that access systematically. The conspiracy appears to have begun sometime in 2013, though the exact date remains unclear because the theft was so gradual and well concealed that it took months before mining officials even realized something was wrong. What investigators would later discover was a sophisticated operation involving multiple participants, each playing specific roles in a well-coordinated scheme to steal gold at various stages of the processing operation. The conspirators were not master criminals or experienced thieves. They were ordinary mine workersmen who had spent years, sometimes decades, working in the mining industry. They understood the processes, the security measures, and, most importantly, the vulnerabilities in the system. This insider knowledge would prove to be far more valuable than any sophisticated criminal expertise. The operation required careful planning and coordination. The conspirators needed to identify the optimal points in the gold processing chain where theft would be least likely to be detected. They needed to develop methods for concealing and removing the stolen gold from the facility. They needed to establish networks for disposing of the gold once it was outside the mine, and they needed to do all of this while maintaining their normal work routines and avoiding suspicion from security personnel and supervisors. The planning phase, studying the system's weaknesses. The success of any insider theft operation depends on intimate knowledge of the target's security protocols and operational procedures. The Sibanye conspirators spent considerable time studying the metallurgical plant's operations, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited without triggering immediate detection. The gold processing operation at Dryfontein involved multiple stages, each with different security measures. The conspirators realized that the most vulnerable points were not where the gold was most concentrated. Those areas received the most security attention, but rather at intermediate stages where smaller quantities of gold-bearing material were being processed and where security measures were less stringent. One of the key vulnerabilities they identified was in the handling of gold-concentrated, gold-bearing material that results from the initial processing stages before final smelting. This concentrate, while not pure gold, contains high concentrations of the precious metal and can be further processed or sold to refiners. Unlike finished gold bars, which are meticulously counted and tracked, the concentrate moved through the plant in larger volumes with less precise accounting, creating opportunities for theft that could go undetected for extended periods. The conspirators also identified weaknesses in the physical security measures. While the metallurgical plant had security checkpoints, cameras, and access controls, these systems had limitations. Security personnel could not monitor every area simultaneously. Cameras had blind spots. Access controls could be circumvented by authorized employees who knew how to exploit procedural gaps. The very familiarity that made employees trusted also gave them knowledge of how to avoid detection. The planning phase also involved establishing networks outside the mine for disposing of the stolen gold. South Africa has a well-developed underground market for stolen gold. with buyers who ask few questions about the origin of the material they purchase. The conspirators would have needed to establish contacts with these buyers, negotiate prices, and arrange for secure transfers that wouldn't attract law enforcement attention. How they stole from one of the world's most secure operations. The actual methods used by the Sibanye conspirators were both ingenious and brazenly simple. Rather than attempting a single dramatic heist, they engaged in systematic, ongoing theft over an extended period. This approach had several advantages. Smaller quantities taken at any one time were less likely to trigger immediate detection. The cumulative value over time could be enormous, and the operation could continue as long as they avoided detection. The primary method involved stealing gold concentrate at various stages of the processing operation. Workers with authorized access to these areas would systematically divert small quantities of concentrate during their shifts. The amounts taken during any single shift might seem insignificant in the context of the plant's total throughput. But over weeks and months, these small thefts accumulated to massive losses. Concealment was critical to the operation's success. The conspirators developed various methods for hiding the stolen concentrate on their persons or in their work equipment. Some concealed gold in specially modified containers or work gear. Others took advantage of blind spots in security camera coverage to transfer material to hiding places that could be accessed later. Still others exploited the trust placed in long-term employees to simply walk out with material concealed in ways that security personnel never thought to check. The removal of stolen gold from the facility was one of the most vulnerable points in the operation. Sibanye, like most mining operations, had security checkpoints where workers were subject to searches before leaving the property. However, these security measures relied heavily on the assumption that workers would attempt to conceal gold on their persons or in obvious containers. The conspirators developed more sophisticated concealment methods that could defeat routine security searches. Some reports suggest that the conspirators may have used vehicles or equipment, leaving the facility to transport larger quantities of gold. Mining operations require constant movement of equipment, supplies, and materials in and out of the facility, creating opportunities for concealment among legitimate cargo. By exploiting these legitimate movements, the conspirators could potentially move larger quantities of gold than would be possible through personal concealment alone. The systematic nature of the theft meant that the operation required coordination among multiple participants. Different individuals had access to different areas of the plant and could exploit different vulnerabilities. By coordinating their efforts, the conspirators could maximize the quantity of gold stolen while minimizing the risk of detection at any single point in the process. The discovery, when missing gold, couldn't be ignored. For months, the theft operation continued successfully, with the conspirators systematically removing gold from the Driefontein metallurgical plant. The gradual nature of the theft meant that initial discrepancies in gold accounting might be attributed to normal variations in processing efficiency, measurement errors, or other routine factors. Mining operations deal with massive volumes of material, and some loss or variation is expected in any large-scale industrial process. However, as the theft continued and the cumulative losses grew, the discrepancies eventually became too large to ignore or explain away through normal operational variations. Sibanye's financial and operational audits began revealing systematic shortfalls in gold recovery that couldn't be accounted for through normal processing losses. The amounts of gold that should have been produced based on the ore processed didn't match the actual gold output, and the gap was growing larger with each accounting period. The realization that the operation was experiencing systematic gold theft sent shockwaves through Sibanye's management. The financial implications were staggering: gold, worth tens of millions of rand, had disappeared from what was supposed to be one of the most secure operations in the mining industry. But beyond the financial losses, the discovery revealed a fundamental failure in security protocols and raised disturbing questions about the integrity of employees trusted with access to the most sensitive areas of the operation. The initial discovery triggered an internal investigation led by Sibanye's security department. The investigation team began analyzing operational data, reviewing security footage, and examining access logs to try to identify when and how the gold was being stolen. However, the systematic and long-term nature of the theft meant that identifying specific incidents or individuals would require extensive investigative work. The scale of the losses eventually became apparent. Approximately 500 kilograms of gold had been stolen over the course of the operation. At the time, with gold prices fluctuating around $40,000 per kilogram, this represented losses exceeding $20 million rand, one of the largest gold thefts in South African mining history. The investigation, recognizing that the scope and sophistication of the theft exceeded their internal security capabilities, Sibanye made the decision to bring in the South African Police Service (SAPS) and other law enforcement agencies. This escalation transformed what had been an internal security matter into a major criminal investigation that would eventually involve multiple police units, forensic experts, and prosecutorial resources. The investigation faced significant challenges from the outset. Unlike a traditional heist, where evidence might point clearly to specific individuals and incidents, this was an insider operation that had been ongoing for months or possibly years. The conspirators had successfully operated within the system, exploiting their legitimate access and knowledge to steal gold without leaving obvious evidence of their activities. The investigative team employed multiple strategies to identify the conspirators and gather evidence for prosecution. One of the most critical investigative tools was the deployment of enhanced surveillance within the metallurgical plant. Investigators installed hidden cameras in strategic locations throughout the facility, focusing on areas where gold concentrate was processed and handled. These covert cameras operated independently of the facility's regular security camera system, meaning that employees who had learned to avoid known camera locations would be unaware they were being monitored. The hidden camera surveillance was conducted over an extended period, with investigators patiently documenting the daily operations of the metallurgical plant. This patient approach would prove critical, as it allowed investigators to observe the actual methods being used to steal gold and to identify the specific individuals involved in the conspiracy. Forensic accountants and operational experts analyzed years of production data, looking for patterns that might indicate when and where gold was being stolen. They compared ore input quantities with gold output, examined processing efficiency metrics, and looked for anomalies that correlated with specific work shifts, employees, or operational procedures. This data analysis helped investigators narrow their focus to specific areas of the operation and specific time periods when the theft was most likely occurring. By correlating operational data with employee schedules and access logs, investigators could identify individuals who had opportunity and access during periods when gold losses were highest. As the investigation progressed, investigators conducted interviews with hundreds of employees, looking for inconsistencies in stories, signs of unexplained wealth, or information about suspicious activities. The investigation team also worked to develop informants within the workforce employees, who might have knowledge of the theft operation but were willing to cooperate with investigators in exchange for leniency or other considerations. Investigators examined the financial records of suspected conspirators, looking for signs of unexplained wealth or suspicious transactions that might indicate proceeds from gold theft. This financial investigation extended beyond the suspects themselves to include family members and known associates, as the conspirators might have attempted to conceal their proceeds through third parties. A critical component of the investigation involved attempting to track the stolen gold through the underground market. Investigators worked with informants and undercover operatives to identify buyers and middlemen who were purchasing stolen gold from mine workers. By mapping these criminal networks, investigators hoped to not only identify all participants in the theft operation, but also to recover some of the stolen gold or proceeds from its sale. The breakthrough catching them in the act. The breakthrough in the investigation came from the hidden camera surveillance operation. After weeks of patient monitoring, the covert cameras captured clear evidence of mine workers systematically stealing gold concentrate from the metallurgical plant. The footage showed the specific methods being used, how the conspirators concealed the gold, how they moved it through the facility, and how they removed it from the premises. The video evidence was devastating to the defense of those involved. Unlike circumstantial evidence or indirect proof, the hidden cameras provided irrefutable documentation of the theft in progress. Investigators could see exactly who was involved, what methods they were using, and how the conspiracy operated. This visual evidence would prove critical in securing convictions when the case eventually went to trial. Armed with this evidence, investigators were able to identify approximately 15 miners and metallurgical plant workers who were directly involved in the gold theft operation. The arrests were coordinated to occur simultaneously, preventing conspirators from warning each other or destroying evidence once they learned that their activities had been discovered. The arrests themselves were dramatic, with SAPS officers and Sibanye security personnel moving quickly to detain the suspects before they could react. Simultaneous search warrants were executed at the homes of the suspects, with investigators looking for stolen gold evidence of unexplained wealth. Communications that might reveal the full scope of the conspiracy or other evidence that could be used in prosecution. The unraveling from arrest to conviction. Following the arrests, the investigation entered a new phase as prosecutors worked to build cases against each of the suspects. The evidence collected during the investigation: video surveillance, operational data, financial records, and witness testimony was organized into a comprehensive case that would demonstrate the scope and sophistication of the conspiracy. Some of the arrested individuals chose to cooperate with investigators, providing detailed information about the operation in exchange for reduced charges or more lenient sentencing recommendations. These cooperating witnesses provided crucial insider perspectives on how the conspiracy operated, who was involved, and where the stolen gold had gone. The cooperation of some conspirators revealed the full extent of the operation and provided information that allowed investigators to trace at least some of the stolen gold through the criminal networks that purchased it. While the bulk of the stolen gold was never recovered, having been sold and processed into untraceable form long before the investigation reached its conclusions. Some proceeds and assets purchased with those proceeds were identified and eventually subject to forfeiture proceedings. The criminal prosecutions moved forward through South Africa's justice system. The evidence against the conspirators was substantial, particularly the video surveillance footage that showed the theft in progress. Defense attorneys had limited options when confronted with such clear evidence of their clients' participation in the conspiracy. Eventually, the cases resulted in convictions for multiple conspirators. The sentences reflected the serious nature of the crimes and the massive losses suffered by Sibanye Gold. Several of the convicted conspirators received prison sentences of 10 years or more significant terms that sent a clear message about the consequences of insider theft from mining operations. The convictions represented a significant victory for Sibanye Gold and South African law enforcement. The successful prosecution of such a sophisticated insider conspiracy demonstrated that even well-planned and carefully executed theft operations could be detected and prosecuted. However, the long period during which the theft went undetected and the massive losses suffered highlighted the ongoing challenges that mining companies face in protecting their operations from insider threats. The aftermath: losses and lessons learned. Despite the successful investigation and convictions, the financial impact of the heist on Sibanye Gold was substantial, with approximately 500 kilograms of gold stolen over the course of the operation. The losses exceeded 20 million rand at the time of the theft. Only a small portion of this amount was ever recovered, as most of the stolen gold had been sold into underground markets and processed in ways that made it untraceable. The company implemented comprehensive security upgrades following the discovery of the theft. New surveillance systems were installed with more extensive coverage and no blind spots. Access controls were enhanced to provide better tracking of employee movements within sensitive areas. Processing procedures were modified to reduce opportunities for theft and to provide better accounting for gold at all stages of processing. Training programs were developed to help security personnel and supervisors identify suspicious behavior and potential indicators of theft. The investigation also revealed systemic weaknesses in how the mining industry approached insider threat prevention. Unlike external security threats, which mining companies had long experience defending against, insider threats required different approaches focused on personnel vetting, behavioral monitoring, and creating security cultures where employees understood the consequences of theft and felt invested in protecting company assets. The Sibanye gold heist became a case study throughout the mining industry, prompting other operations to review their own security measures and consider whether they were vulnerable to similar insider conspiracies. Industry associations developed best practice guidelines for preventing insider theft, drawing on lessons learned from the Sibanye case and other incidents. For the workers convicted in the conspiracy, the consequences extended beyond their prison sentences. Their families suffered economic hardship during their incarceration and bore the stigma of their crimes. Some faced additional civil litigation from Sibanye, seeking restitution for the losses the company suffered. Gold theft in South African mining, the Sibanye gold heist, while extraordinary in its scale and duration, was not an isolated incident. South Africa's mining industry has long struggled with the problem of gold theft, ranging from small-scale opportunistic theft by individual workers to sophisticated organized crime operations. The country's status as one of the world's leading gold producers has created enormous opportunities for criminal activity at every stage of the mining and processing chain. Industry estimates suggest that gold theft costs South African mining companies hundreds of millions of rand annually. This theft takes many forms. Workers smuggling small quantities of ore or concentrate out of mines' organized syndicates. Bribing security personnel to look the other way, criminal gangs. Targeting gold in transit between facilities and sophisticated refiners who purchase stolen gold and process it into forms that can't be traced to specific sources. The underground market for stolen gold operates openly in some areas, with buyers who are willing to purchase gold, with few questions asked about its origins. This ready market for stolen gold creates strong economic incentives for theft and makes it difficult to disrupt the criminal networks that facilitate the trade in stolen precious metals. Law enforcement efforts to combat gold theft are complicated by the scale of the problem, the sophistication of the criminal networks involved, and the corruption that sometimes compromises security personnel and even law enforcement officials. Successful prosecutions like the Sibanye case are important victories, but they represent only a small fraction of the total gold theft occurring throughout South Africa's mining sector. The legacy of the Sibanye gold heist. The Sibanye gold mine heist stands as one of the largest gold thefts in South African mining history, a sophisticated insider conspiracy that systematically stole hundreds of kilograms of gold, worth tens of millions of rand, over an extended period. The patient and determined investigation that eventually brought the conspirators to justice demonstrated that even well-executed insider operations leave traces that can be detected and used to secure convictions. The story of this heist is a reminder that the greatest security threats often come not from external criminals, but from trusted insiders who exploit their access and knowledge for criminal gain. The conspirators were not master criminals. They were ordinary mine workers who recognized vulnerabilities in the systems they worked within and methodically exploited those vulnerabilities for personal profit. For Sibanye Gold, the heist prompted comprehensive security reforms and a renewed focus on insider threat prevention. For the South African mining industry, it served as a wake-up call about the vulnerabilities that exist in even the most secure operations. And for law enforcement, it demonstrated the effectiveness of patient investigation, covert surveillance, and comprehensive evidence gathering in prosecuting complex insider conspiracies. Today, the Driefontein metallurgical plant continues to process gold, or under enhanced security measures designed to prevent a recurrence of the theft that cost the company so dearly. The workers convicted in the conspiracy serve their sentences, their dreams of easy wealth having instead resulted in imprisonment and the destruction of their careers and reputations.
Subscribe for this and many more stories.